Autumn. By far my favourite time of the year. It's a feast for the senses. You've got the thin, piercing light, the cool crispness of the air, the earthy smell of the earth, and the leaves, they're all crunchy and orange and that. Yeah, you know who can conjure it better than me? The romantic poet John Keats. Yes, today we're going to be looking at a poem. Wait, come back. Poetry needn't be scary. The best explanation of poetry I ever heard was from Keats's contemporary Devon lad Samuel Taylor Coleridge, who defined it like this: poetry, the best words in the best order. He was being facetious, of course, but in a weird way he really hit the nail on the head. Poetry is a way of expressing an emotion or an idea or capturing a moment in the most perfect way possible. Finding not only the right words to say what you want to say, but the words with the right sounds to match what you want to say, and the right rhythm to match what you want to say. It needn't be beautiful necessarily. If you wanted to show your disgust, then you might choose the most disgusting words and arrange them disgustingly. Or you might want to express your boredom by choosing boring words and arranging them boringly, and so on. Anyway, in danger of getting boring myself, let's get straight to the poem. The best words in the best order to describe the best season. To Autumn. Season of mists and mellow fruitfulness, close bosom friend of the maturing sun, conspiring with him how to load and bless with fruit the vines that round the thatched eaves run, to bend with apples the mossed cottage trees, and fill all fruit with ripeness to the core, to swell the gourd and plump the hazel shells with a sweet kernel, to set budding more and still more, later flowers for the bees, until they think warm days will never cease, for summer has o'erbrimmed their clammy cells. Who hath not seen thee oft amid thy store? Sometimes whoever seeks abroad may find thee sitting careless on a granary floor, thy hair soft lifted by the winnowing wind, or on a half-reaped furrow sound asleep, drowsed with a fume of poppies, while thy hook spares the next swath and all its twined flowers. And sometimes like a gleaner thou dost keep steady thy laden head across a brook, or by a cider press with patient look thou watchest the last oozings hours by hours. Where are the songs of spring? Ay, where are they? Think not of them, thou hast thy music too. While barred clouds bloom the soft dying day, and touch the stubble plains with rosy hue, then in a wailful choir the small gnats mourn among the river sallows, borne aloft or sinking as the light wind lives or dies. And full-grown lambs loud bleat from hilly bourne, hedge crickets sing, and now with treble soft the red-breast whistles from a garden croft, and gathering swallows twitter in the skies. Right, let's start with a confession. Even though I'm an English teacher, I often find poetry pretty impenetrable. I'm definitely not one of those people who hears a poem for the first time and its meaning leaps out of the page and strikes me like an arrow to the heart. I mean, what's a winnowing wind anyway? Gleaner? No, me neither. Don't get me started on brimmed. Full-grown lambs? They're called sheep, mate. But finding a poem hard to decipher should not stop us enjoying it. Treat them like a puzzle to be unpicked or a code to be cracked, and they can be very rewarding. And John Keats's To Autumn is a perfect example of this. Let's peel back some layers and see what's really going on here. Welcome back to the Dartmoor Podcast. Right, confession number 2. John Keats, the author of To Autumn, never, as far as I know, came to Dartmoor. The closest he got was this house in Teignmouth, where he stayed for a while in 1818, and, mostly, judging by the content of his letters, complained about the weather. In fact, none of the romantic poets seem to have come to Dartmoor, which is a shame, because they'd have absolutely loved it. because the Romantics worshipped the sublime, a feeling of awe and wonder in the face of nature. If you've ever witnessed a stormy sea crash against the coast, watched the stars wheel across the sky, seen a ridiculously beautiful sunset, or stood atop a tor bracing yourself against the wind, then you know the feeling. Nature is powerful, beautiful, mysterious, and fierce. Romantic, in this context, doesn't mean lovey-dovey candlelight dinners and walks in the moonlight. It means romanticising the past. The Romantic poets were writing in the first half of the 19th century and raging against the way England was changing due to the Industrial Revolution. People were abandoning their lives in the countryside and pouring into the cities to seek better futures in the factories. But instead of finding their fortune, they found cramped conditions, pollution, dangerous jobs and low wages. The Romantics yearned for a simpler time when people were freer, more innocent and more in touch with nature. Like I said, Dartmoor would have been right up their street. And particularly in autumn. The moor is so atmospheric and moody at this time of year. There's a stillness and a darkness to the place, a raw feeling of ancientness radiating up through the cold granite. Sublime. One of the things I like best about Keats's To Autumn is that it doesn't mention crunchy orange leaves, mushrooms or pumpkin spiced lattes once. It avoids the clichés and instead focuses on what is clearly a very, very early autumn, just as the summer ends and the year tips over from growth into decay. Which is particularly appropriate. Keats was dying when he wrote this poem. In September 1819, just a year after his stay in Teignmouth, at the age of just 23, Keats sat down to compose his final verse. He knew full well that the tuberculosis in his lungs would soon kill him. The time for writing poems was at an end. He wouldn't need the money or fame or respect that he'd been struggling for and largely failing to attain all his life. It was time to put his affairs in order and make the most of what time he had left. Poems. They're never about what they seem, are they? You thought To Autumn was about autumn, did you? Well, it's a poem, so of course it's not. Or at least not entirely. It's about the autumn of life. With this vital piece of context now in place, let's look at the poem again. The first chunk of the poem describes autumn as a time of plentifulness, a bursting harvest festival of a stanza. Just look at all the words here relating to fruit and food and growth. A more pretentious podcaster might say, words from the lexical field of harvest. And it's the sound of the words too. Mellow, bosom, bless, gourd, plump. Opulent, soft, round sounds you can roll around your mouth like a ripe damson. Ugh. It's a bit much, isn't it? There's a feeling that everything's about to burst and rot. It's so luxurious, it's making me feel a little bit ill. And there are even some clues creeping in at the end of the stanza that confirm this feeling that all is not quite right. The bees think warm days will never cease. They're complacent. And those clammy cells don't sound particularly appealing either. Autumn is a time to, quite literally, gather in the fruits of your labour, and the autumn of your life is metaphorically the same. A time to withdraw that pension and take the time to enjoy what you've earned, but also to acknowledge that the heyday of your youth is coming to an end. In stanza 2, Keats really digs into personifying autumn. Autumn is a woman who lies sleepily on the floor of a granary, dozes off among the harvest, or carries her goods across a stream. Oh, a gleaner, by the way, was a poor rural peasant picking up the last bits of the harvest that had been left for them in the fields. Kind of a pre-industrial food bank. If you look closely, there are lots of words here hinting at a kind of drugged doziness. Careless, sound asleep, patient. and that fume of poppies is very suspicious. Autumn is a lazy, sleepy sort of time where everything is winding down. That end of the stanza with autumn watching the cider press is particularly dizzy. The last oozings, hours by hours, is so slow and boozy. Reading it aloud, you're forced to slow right down and savour the long vowel sounds. And again, this is about more than just the time of year. Keats seems to be embracing the drowsy languor of his final years. It's really indulgent. He's kind of really getting into dying in a way. He's revelling in the tragic sadness of it all. The final stanza is probably my favourite, and not just because it has birds in it. It starts with a frankly confrontational challenge to spring and youth. Yeah, youth, spring, what of it? The maturity of autumn is much greater. And it's just full of rich sounds and music to support that assertion. All choirs and bleating and whistling and twittering. It's like Keats is really trying to live in the moment and soak up all the beauty of what will probably be his last autumn. I can't skip past the redbreast whistling from a garden croft without dropping an ornithological nugget of information on you. The bird we call a robin, in days of yore, was rather more logically called a redbreast. The change came about because the twee Victorians used to alliterate the name. Hello there, Robin Redbreast. And eventually that just morphed into robin. A similar phenomenon applies to other birds who are given names. Maggie Pie, Jackdaw, and Jenny Wren. Right, anyway, enough birds, back to the poem. The lexical field of death is very noticeable in the last stanza. The gnats are mourning and wailing, the day is dying, and even those full-grown lambs are ready for the table. There's a real mood of acceptance here. Keats's final poem feels like the words of a man whose senses are sharpened by the knowledge that his time is running out. And it's a shame, perhaps, that we need the fear and imminence of death to appreciate life to its fullest. If there's a message to be gleaned from Keats's masterpiece, maybe it's that we need to open ourselves to the heart-bursting rapture of the sublime. Be present and enjoy the beauty of the moment, no matter what the season. Thanks for watching, everyone. See you next time.
You really wanted to be in the video, didn't you? What a superstar. Well done. Good bleating from the hilly bourne.